The House Oversight Committee will come back to order here. Looks like Secretary Benson is here. I will point out you are late for your appointment here. If this was at one of your offices, you might have lost your chance. So I think, yes. So Secretary Benson and myself, we talked, I think it was about a week and a half ago, about discussing these appointments. It's been a huge issue in our district. You agreed to do that, and I will note, within a week and a half, we schedule an appointment, so it's better than the 3 months at your office is. I'm not trying to brag, but we do good work here. And it's a good committee for it. We got Chair O'Malley, chairs Transportation, got Chair Hoydinga, chairs Communications Technology, so really there's a good overlap of issues here. So we're glad you're here today. I know you've got a brief presentation. If you could go through that, and then we'll get to some questions.
Thank you. Well, thank you. I'm looking forward to talking with you about our service-driven operations model. Sure. We're all friends. I thought you could. Well, I'll talk extra loud. So I want to just start by saying my hope for today's conversation is that we can find ways to work together, as I mentioned to you, Chair Johnson, when we spoke, because I think we all have the same interest in mind. We want to support our residents, we want to support our motorists and our vehicle owners. And I also want to start by emphasizing the importance of working from the same set of facts and data, and emphasizing that we can come to the right solutions together, but only if we set aside false narratives and hyperbole and instead look at the interests of our constituents, which I know you all have a commitment to doing as well as leaders in your communities. So I want to start by sharing with you data on 3 things: how the department operated in the past, the work we've done to improve our services in the last 2 years, and my vision for the months and years ahead. So I look forward to then taking your questions and expanding the conversation, as I do believe there are many ways we can incorporate constructive feedback and insights to work together moving forward. So the first data point that illustrates the central challenge at the heart of our work to support all 10 million Michigan residents is the mismatch between the volume of transactions and the department's current capacity. The reason for this mismatch is threefold. Basically, what you see here is a visual of what the staff and offices were, and then X's over the cuts that have been made over the past several decades. What that has created is a scenario where we have seen a 40% reduction in staff, a 46% reduction in offices over the past several decades, at the same time in the same period when our state's population grew by about 10% and the number of vehicles increased by 25%. So this is why most branches looked like this when I visited them shortly after taking office in 2019. What you see here is the walk-in model. What you see here is a history of cuts, disinvestment, and neglect. And that's why under the legislature's current funding and infrastructure model, and under our current legal requirements, the entire idea of walking into a branch office looks like this. Now, residents know that this does not work. They notice the cuts in staff, offering for years a number of pieces of feedback like this that have complained about the mess, the long waits, the staff who are miserable, and our staff, by the way, couldn't pick up their kids from school or childcare because they never knew on a given day under the walk-in model when they'd be done working. Decades-old technology crashed frequently, and there was hardly any data being tracked, so even a small problem or predicting when staff could go home at the end of the day was not solvable. So then there's the My Time system. Now, this is an idea that sounds great. Get in line virtually and get a text when it's your turn. It's something that I talked a lot about as a candidate as well, both in 2010 and in 2018. But when it actually was implemented, it was a false promise and a broken system. And that's because the system was wildly inaccurate. I experienced this firsthand when I visited every office in early 2019, signing up for every My Time option when I could. What I experienced was exactly what residents here point out. You were told one of 2 things. One, you could be told to arrive back in a branch in an hour, and then you'd be seen. And then upon doing so, you'd only be told that you'd still have to wait another hour or more. Sometimes, on the other hand, residents were told, come back in 2 hours. And then just 30 minutes later, they'd get a text saying, you're next in line. Then they'd go to the branch and find that they still had to wait another 45 minutes when they arrived. These stories were typical, and also not just a false promise and a mismatched expectation. It's also why countless other states abandoned this model long before I took office. And also, when we looked at the data, this system created and was a part of the reason why there was such an increase in wait times over the past 10 years. Indeed, in just 8 years, the average wait time in our state tripled to an average of 43 minutes per branch across the state. And if you look at just the larger offices in our most populous areas, the average wait time for 2018, the entire year, was over an hour at 71 minutes. That's up from 33 minutes in 2012. And then slide 9 shows us the 10 busiest offices. Detroit, Lansing, Troy, Livonia, Kalamazoo, everywhere the average wait time was 1 hour and 40 minutes in 2018. That was the average throughout the entire year, and there were regular reports of waits that stretched multiple hours, forcing people to take time off work and hire childcare just to visit department offices. Meanwhile, as wait times increased for years under this model, resident satisfaction decreased. Michiganders didn't like it. In fact, according to thousands of reviews the department has received since 2015, the average customer satisfaction steadily declined every year between 2015 and 2019. And as I referenced earlier, the department, as well as websites that were set up to receive complaints, received numerous ones from residents during this time period who knew that the system was broken. One of my most favorite and memorable was a backhanded compliment where someone said, "You got a great system," if it was 1972. And they were right. So in 2019, I basically had two choices. One, do we continue making piecemeal improvements to a system that didn't really seem to be working? Or do we completely revamp and modernize how we provide services to our residents? I want to move in the forward direction because I think that's what our citizens want. But it starts by solving two important issues and really advancing two important goals. Number one, we need to reduce residents' need to visit our offices and make the process more efficient, number two, when they do. So this is an option that's not only popular with Michiganders, but it also makes efficient use of taxpayer dollars, because I also don't want to come here to you and say, just give us a lot more money so we can open up more branch offices and hire more people. We don't need to do that. We can actually do things smarter and more efficiently by accomplishing those goals of getting less people into our offices and then ensuring when they do, they're seen right away, which I actually think is what our goal is here collectively. So the first thing we did was work to reduce the need for residents to visit our branch offices. So we carried out two massive technology upgrades over the past 2 years, enabling more residents to carry out their transactions online and in the mail. We replaced 90 failing kiosks that rarely worked and did not accept cash with nearly 150 new service stations that are monitored 24/7 to ensure they're always functioning. These kiosks, unlike the previous ones, did not cost the state any money, and the new ones were installed and maintained without a single taxpayer dollar being expended. We put over a third of them in Kroger's and Meijer's across the state, and we revised our renewal mailers to more clearly inform our residents of their options to renew their licenses and their plates. This caused a sea change in how residents do business with us. In 2018, 75%, nearly 3/4 of all of our transactions were done in branch offices, even if they didn't require a branch office visit. Now, just 2 years later, that number has dropped to 40%, with 60% of transactions carried out online, in the mail, or at our self-service stations. Most business with us is now being done from people's homes or while they're at their local grocery store. And that's moving in the right direction. Residents don't have to wait in line at all in these 60% of these examples. They can carry out their tasks in minutes. And of course, the 40% is a number that we want to continue to decrease. I'd like to get us to 25%, because I think if we get there, that's where we'll have the supply and the demand match, so that whenever anyone wants to come to an office, they're able to do so at a time that works for their schedule and be in and out in a convenient time set. So one of the issues is that state law requires about 40% of our transactions to still be done in an office visit. And because our staff has been so severely cut back, we're dealing with a backlog of transactions that built up while expirations were extended during the pandemic. And that's why at this moment, and really over the last month, this month, and next month, we do see a backlog of transactions that has been built up while expirations were extended, and that has currently created a significantly high demand in our offices for appointments. And that's why you see and are hearing some of the things you're hearing right now. But I'm here today to tell you that we're moving still in the right direction. Residents are now typically in and out of our offices in just 20 minutes. They can now schedule their visit and be confident that they'll be seen by our staff at the time they expect to be seen. In a timely manner, our staff will predict and allow customer transactions to go smoothly, and ensure that when someone arrives with the right set of documents, they're able to be in and out in an average of 20 minutes. Now, of course, a lot have tried to say that instead of waiting in offices for hours, residents now have to wait for months to schedule a branch office visit. That may make for a great headline or a great soundbite, but it's actually not true. Half of all our appointments are released every day, twice a day, for the very next day. That's thousands of appointments, and we're increasing that number every week. Thousands of appointments that are booked every day across all offices in the state. We set up this system this way intentionally, knowing that some residents will want to plan ahead because they know ahead of time when they want to visit our office, but others will have to make a last-minute decision, and in that case, or for example, if someone buys a used car and needs a title transfer, we want to be able to give them the option to come in the next day. Now, a lot of folks have criticized the fact that the next day appointments fill up fast, and that's true. In this moment, they do. And again, that's a capacity issue, not a reflection of a broken system. The same capacity constraints that caused wait times to skyrocket in the past decade are now what we see manifesting themselves in the demand for appointments. The difference is that now no one is forced to take time off work or pay for childcare to wait in line for hours at a branch office. Now, I know several of you have asked your residents for complaints. I expect I'll hear more about that in the next few moments. But given that you've only asked for complaints, I actually also wanted to share with you some positive feedback. But before I do so, I want to emphasize this positive feedback is not just anecdotal, as a lot of complaints can be. The positive feedback is supported by aggregate data. Indeed, the aggregate customer reviews for our offices, the aggregate customer reviews for our offices that has been falling since 2015, where it was hovered between 2 and 3. It was 2 in 2019, and it's now hit an all-time high of 4 out of 5 stars. That's double what it was before we switched to our current operation model. Now, here's just some feedback we've gotten from each of your constituents. Chairman Johnson, the Grand Rapids office on 28th Street serves your constituents. Here are 3 reviews singing the praises of the appointment system. Minority Vice Chair Brixey, your constituents are served by one of the offices that had wait times averaging 100 minutes in 2018. We now have feedback from residents very happy to be in and out in just 16 minutes, while another wishes the system had always operated this way. Vice Chair Outman, both the Greenville and Elma offices serve your constituents, and here's a constituent celebrating the fact that he can now be done within 30 minutes of his appointment time. Representative LeGrand, your constituents in the Grand Rapids area likely left these messages saying that this is the way it always should be and that they had the easiest visit to our office ever. Representative Hoydinga, constituents in your district would use our Cadillac, Reed City, and Big Rapids offices. Here, one of them notes he was in and out in 12 minutes, and another points out she was done in just 10. Representative Young, visitors to our Detroit and Redford offices said, wow, this was unlike any day at the Secretary of State I've ever experienced, while another marveled at completing multiple transactions in just 9 minutes. Representative Riley, more of the same from residents at the Clarkston and Pontiac offices, and one rightly notes a trend we've also seen in other offices and other areas, that the appointment system also makes our staff happier, enabling them to provide better customer service. Representative O'Malley, after one person's visit to the Ludington office, Douglas Black comes right out and says he likes the new system better than the old one. And meanwhile, Angelica Lopez-Hoag said her visit to the Suttons Bay office, which I also enjoy visiting, was the best experience she has ever had at one of our offices. And Rep. Wozniak, Validia Lindsay said the customer service at the Shelby Township office was fast and professional, organized, and done in 10 minutes. So I want you to know these are just a small sample of the notes we've received since switching to appointments, but it's important you hear this as well, because we get this feedback every day, and I know, given your positions, you're not necessarily positioned to get the same type of feedback. And so we know also, however, that the system's not perfect. And as we emerge out of a year-long global pandemic that created unanticipated office closures and staff shortages, we've got a lot of work to do to ensure all of our residents are as satisfied as these. So I want to just close by saying where we're headed, and here we are. In this moment, if we did nothing, would see a reduced demand in the appointments and would see easier demand for access to our appointments in the months ahead, and that's for these reasons. So in March, you see, we had a technology upgrade that significantly reduced the need for office visits. We're still now just in the final stages of that technology upgrade, which was the largest in decades, but it now enables hundreds of thousands of drivers with enhanced licenses, for example, to renew them without a visit to our offices, which is really important. So we're just now seeing the beginning of what this technology upgrade is going to do for our residents who no longer have to go to our offices to renew their licenses. And as the state emerges out of the pandemic, we expect to have fewer staff out sick on a daily basis and fewer offices closed due to a COVID exposure. That's been a significant issue that we've been dealing with, particularly over the past year, but even more so in the past several months. And as this occurs, we're going to be able to continually add appointments wherever we can, as we've been doing over the past few weeks, to maximize our capacity. Already, we've been able to add thousands of additional appointment slots over the last month as we find ways to also shave off minutes of transaction times. So we're increasing our capacity in every way we're able to, including at our call center, where we just last week finished a technology switch and dedicated more staff to booking appointments with internet limitations, and now booking more than quadruple the appointments than we'd previously been doing by phone. We're also on track to implement in July a change to the law that will require new license and ID photos every 12 years instead of 8. That will dramatically reduce the demand for office visits for a number of years. And finally, we continue to work through the backlog created by the extension of expiration deadlines, and we'll start to see a drop in demand in the months ahead as those appointments are completed. So my expectation is we're already going to see changes and trends pay off through the fall. And between now and then, I'm also planning to visit every branch office in this state. And I'd love to, when I'm in your district, have you join me, because I think it's a great way to talk to residents, to talk to staff, and actually see, in my view, how we can develop practices and solutions moving forward that continue to improve our services. I want to close just by reiterating what I said a few weeks ago. I believe there is a path forward to increase our capacity and improve our services even more, but we can't do it without your partnership. We want you to work with us to develop legislative proposals that invest in our infrastructure so that we can increase our capacity to serve all of our residents' needs. We want to change in the law to reduce the need for drivers to come to a branch office for testing and permit residents to take photos for IDs themselves, as they have done for passport photos for decades, instead of having to come into a branch office to get that photo. Those two changes alone would significantly reduce the number of people who have to come to a branch office, thereby opening up more appointments and increasing our capacity to handle more residents who need that in-person service. Finally, we'd love to work with you to explore more efficient ways to serve our residents. 3 options are to invest in mini offices, driver centers that would allow for people to come in for simply a driver's-related transaction like a title transfer or testing, with one staff member in one small location, perhaps in the front of a mire, they'd be able to see residents quickly and serve them quickly without having to invite them to go to a branch office instead for those very small timed services. We'd also like to create half a dozen pop-up offices around the state that help us better serve senior centers, rural communities, and other residents with unique needs. These pop-up offices could go not just to senior centers, but to places of worship, to other festivals or other places where people already are, so that when people are there, they can do their business with the state in a way that makes sense for them. We want to also finally update our laws to allow for public-private partnerships so that people can access more state services while they're getting their groceries, while they're banking, or other things that they're already going to be doing. All of these things would also reduce traffic into our branch offices, making the appointment system one that is what we ultimately want it to become, where that any time someone wants to come into our office, they simply schedule their visit ahead of time at a time that is their choice, that is convenient for them, and then we're ready for them when they get there and they can be seen right away. In the months ahead, we're going to continue to optimize that system to move towards that goal, and we've identified a whole bunch of ways, these included, to get us there. Finally, I just want to emphasize that on the rare occasion when residents arrive unannounced and there is a staff person to serve them, we've emphasized to our staff that our policy is to book them an immediate appointment and assist them right away. Additionally, we have for years allowed residents to leave and return if they forgot a needed document and be seen right away when they come back. So we'll continue to reinforce that with our staff so that they know that that is something that is part of our policy that we'll continue to do. Our goal is to make doing business with us as convenient, as efficient as possible, from home or the grocery store, wherever someone happens to be. So I look forward to working with you and hope we can identify some things we can do together to move forward, not backward, in a new direction to serve all of our residents. Thanks for giving me some time to talk today.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I know we've worked together on some legislation that's actually passed out of the Senate Transportation Committee last week. I fully agree with you. There's a lot of things we can do to streamline a lot of processes that we're going through right now to make trips to the SOS office less frequent. I don't think that's the issue before us today. The issue before us is the appointment-only model. You point to, hey, half of these things are the next day. Half the appointments are next day appointments. That's great for those half. That means half of them aren't, though. You mentioned the 28th Street office near my district. I just looked it up. Scheduled appointment, end of August. That's not feasible. Just going to read someone comment. Their spouse broke a leg, was given a doctor's note for a handicap sticker. The leg was healed enough to walk on before they got their appointment. That's the problem. There's people that need timeliness here, and they're not able to get into the SOS office. We're not saying get rid of the appointments. If someone wants to make an appointment, if that works for them, that's great. We're saying why not have that walk-in option?
Was there?
Why not have that option to walk in? That's the question.
I appreciate that, and we're certainly sensitive to making sure all our customers know, for example, if you go on at noon or if you went on at 8, you'd find next day appointments for that 28th Street office. But
that's very difficult. I mean, you have to really get on there just at that exact same time. If your internet speed isn't out that fast, you're not going to get it. I mean, there's a reason why they're selling appointments on Facebook Marketplace, because it's not working.
Yeah, and on that front, we know that is occurring, and that's an unfortunate way in which people are taking advantage of this current moment coming out of the pandemic. And I hope you'll work with us to make sure that we're shutting those things down when they happen. But again, everything you're talking about just gets back to capacity. We want people to be able to make an appointment whenever it is that's convenient for them. We know some will want to make it in advance, and some will want to make it for the next day. And so the solution is to increase the capacity, increase the number of appointments that are available. And as I've just mentioned, we're going to be doing that more in the weeks ahead. But there are also other options. For example, the driver centers that I mentioned, if we were able to create some of those, maybe 4 in different parts of our most populous areas, that creates another avenue for people to interact with the state, get their services done, see someone, and be on their way. But I hear you. I mean, the current system in this moment, in May of 2021, emerging out of a pandemic, reflects a mismatch between our capacity to serve and the demand. So we're going to continue to reduce the demand, as we've been doing quite successfully over the past 2 years, and then continue to increase our capacity, as we've been doing over the past several weeks. And so we appreciate the focus on our work in this moment, and we appreciate the feedback, because I'm going to be working with our staff next week, meeting with them to review a lot of these ideas and look at the data, and invite you to be a part of those conversations, to look at the data to see how that would actually impact on the aggregate, our office operations. And then, as I mentioned, I'm going to be visiting all of our offices, talking to residents, and really identifying ways as we emerge out of this moment to continue to improve our services so that our capacity matches the demand.
So you talk about capacity limitations. One of the things that you've eliminated is the weeknights and the weekend office availability. For a normal person that works 8 to 5, they can't make it work to go during the day. There used to be an option, I think it was like Wednesday nights you could go in, or on a Saturday morning. Those are all gone. Wouldn't that actually fix your capacity problems?
I don't know if I'd go so far as to say it would fix them, but it's certainly something that I think that we're thinking about bringing back in some capacity, particularly to get through the backlog that's emerged in the pandemic. I agree that I think it's important to allow those more convenient hours, and that's something we want to work to provide. It is challenging when there's a threat of budget cuts, which, you know, obviously it costs money to keep offices open later or to keep them open on Saturdays. But by switching to appointments, we're actually able to give residents predictability so that they know if they do make an appointment, even if they do have to take 30 minutes off to do it, perhaps during their lunch break, they can be in and out of our offices in 20 minutes. But that said, I think, you know, I have visited offices when they were open on Saturdays and seen similar inefficiencies that I talked about earlier. And so we want to ensure, as we do move in that direction, to increase convenience of our options, that we provide enough support for our staff to be able to provide good service during those hours. For example, on Saturdays, when I visited the Lansing office, for example, which was open on a Saturday, I noticed that these folks that were staffing those offices had already worked a significant number of hours that week, and they were exhausted. And sometimes the offices were understaffed as a result, either late into the evening or on Saturdays. So it didn't actually increase the capacity of our system to handle a number of new appointments or a number of new transactions. And so, because essentially what would happen is business hours staff would be cut so that those staff could be moved to weekends and evenings. And then in doing so, you'd create an issue where there were less transactions happening during the day. So more people would go to evenings and weekends. And then there was a very slow capacity during those times because the offices were understaffed during those times. So again, it's another example of something like the My Time system that works great in theory. And I completely agree. I've looked at other states that have offices open on Saturdays but closed on Mondays as another option. I think as we move forward, we want to look at all the data and really have a sense of how things will actually play out, given our current staffing numbers. And I think one of the best ways to help us increase hours in every office in the state is to invest in our ability to hire more staff, to staff those offices during those additional hours, or to pay people overtime to work in addition to the 40 hours per week that the state has allotted.
Representative O'Malley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Secretary, glad to have you here. I'm a little older than you, and just to be fair here, your business of Secretary of State has been the butt of jokes for decades. I remember as a kid listening to Johnny Carson make fun of the DMV. So you're in a rock and a hard place spot. I understand that. But I guess what I'm hearing is, and I have this question is, especially on the heels of the UIA issues and people being left out, this is a customer service type of situation. So yes, we are in the middle of this pandemic glut, but how do we get through that? How do we, the person who needs the handicap sticker, the person who just sold their car, law enforcement saying, hey, if we don't have plates, we don't know who they are. What do we do right now?
I think a couple of things. One, and as I said, I'm going to be meeting with my staff this week and next week to answer that question. Because I think we want to make some short-term adjustments, particularly as we emerge out of the pandemic, and we're seeing an increase, the ability to increase our capacity to prioritize immediate needs. And those two issues that you brought up, I think, are two examples, as well as new drivers who have to come in and get an ID and want to, or people who've just moved to the state. So one of the things I want to look at and explore are there ways to create prioritized opportunities to schedule things right away for things that are immediate needs. And that's another reason why, I mean, frankly, the legislature can act quickly to allow third parties to provide certain services as well. That then we can quickly get up to speed with, in partnerships with other agencies, like, for example, third-party drivers testing agencies, so that people, if they want it, drivers test. They don't have to come into our office to do it, but they can go to a driver's agency and do the test there. So I think, you know, I look at it as we have a model where there's, you know, 100 people that need to be seen per hour, and our ability is to see 70 per hour or something like that, right? So how do we solve that? Well, we take those 30 perhaps and give them other opportunities through other partners to go there for their business, or we increase the number of people we can serve per hour. And I'd like to do both, because I think that's how we get out of this current moment. But I do recognize your appreciation for the challenge, because you're right, no state has actually solved this issue. I often joke that when people ask me what I do as Secretary of State, I say I run the DMV, which makes me very popular. And I get it. But I actually, and I sincerely say this, and this is why I sincerely want to work with every one of you, we can solve this. Like, there's data practices out there that technology, opportunities technology creates, and business practices out there and partnerships we can create. We could actually solve this. We need some changes to the law to get there, like some more things we want to do, like these, you know, allow people to have third-party testing and stuff like that. But could you imagine if we actually became the state that got this right? And that's what gives me optimism, because I actually think we are, the numbers show, moving in the right direction. Yeah, we're in a challenging moment right now because we're just emerging out of this pandemic and all these other challenges. And it's a new system that a lot of people inherently takes time to embrace. But all the data I've seen shows that things are moving in the right direction. We're not there yet. And that's why I appreciate your feedback to help us get there, and hopefully your partnership as well to make additional changes to help us keep moving in this direction. Yes, Representative.
So you said something, though, that I know on paper makes sense, but in reality is a little difficult: technology. Some of our districts, technology isn't necessarily up to snuff. We've got some folks, you know, I have a hard enough time sometimes with my smartphone, and others that computers and things, they don't want anything to do with them. Yeah. So they're going to call in. For those people who, they got to call in. They're not going to get on, you know, my iPhone here and do it. How do you help them right now in this, again, in this glut?
Well, I think two things. One, in the immediate sense, in the call center, as I mentioned, we've quadrupled our capacity to schedule appointments through there. We used to be able to schedule a few hundred. Now we can schedule 1,000, and that's increasing per day, and that's increasing as we increase our capacity. So I think there are efficiencies that we can develop within the call center to improve. Would also love funding to help either invest in new technology, because there's a lot of call centers out there that work a lot better than ours because they have different technologies, which we don't have the resources to invest in. I'd love to do that. Or just hire more staff to answer more phones, which is another option. So it's sort of, the call center is an example of us continuing to try on our own to do as much as we can to improve the model. But we've in some ways reached a wall where we essentially need some changes to the law or more investment to improve that center. Now, the second thing I want to make is, the second point I want to make is when it comes to serving our seniors, our rural communities, or even areas that just simply don't have access to the internet or familiarity, or residents who use cash, which I also have, have talked to folks who said they can't go online because I don't have a credit card. So that's also what, in my view, two things. One, I want the offices to be fully available for the people who need it, and I think that's an example of that. And we get there by removing things that don't need to be in branch offices, that can be done in other places. That way it frees up our branch offices for the people who really need them, and for the appointments for people who really need them. But in addition to that, the pop-up offices I mentioned would enable us, I'd love every senior center in the state to spend, for a pop-up office or mobile office, to visit one day a month. The first Tuesday of every month, the Secretary of State office is going to be at your senior center, and you can do anything you need at that time. Now, obviously, there's lots of different ways that can play out. You can also have rural communities, similarly gatherings, as I mentioned, places of worship where, every second Sunday, the mobile offices is going to be at your church, and you can go there. And so it creates more of a collaborative approach that people see this office as something that's meeting them where they're at, as opposed to something distant they have to come to and hope that it works when they do. So all that to say is, I'm all for exploring those options and sensitive to them, because one of the challenges of doing this work is that you're serving 10 million residents, all with very different needs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think kind of in response to that, we're not opposed to trying different things. I like some of your ideas. They're creative. Let's have that discussion. Let's try that out. But in the meantime, when we're trying to figure this out, why not have that walk-in option? It seems to me you're getting the worst of both worlds here, where you have a backlog because of COVID, because we extended a lot of things. You have this backlog, and you want to try these new ideas. How about until we get those new ideas implemented, we bring in the walk-in option until we get there?
Yeah, again, I appreciate that as a suggested path forward. The data I've seen shows that wouldn't work. All it would create is a reduction of appointments available, because we'd have to move existing staff off of serving those appointments. So you'd have additional challenges at a time when we're moving in the right direction, where we're increasing the capacity of appointments. It would actually reduce the capacity, and then it would create the same model I talked about earlier, where you've got people standing in line, waiting for hours, and not necessarily, happy with that service. I think, in my view,
but if they're not happy with that service, they can schedule an appointment. I mean, I'm all about pushing the appointment, pushing online, but say, hey, if worse comes to worse, at the end of the day, you can walk in. You might have to sit there and wait a long time, but some people say, hey, I need something done today or tomorrow. I can't get an appointment scheduled until August. I'm willing to figure that out and deal with that pain. But what isn't acceptable is the idea that I've got to wait until August before I even get a chance. And then we hear the stories of people going in, and they say, oh, you don't have the right document, and now you got to wait a whole another couple months.
Yeah. Well, two things on that. One, and we'd love your help with this. I think, one, when you do hear from people saying months, I can't get an appointment for months, tell them the truth. Tell them they can go on at 8 or 12 and make an appointment for the next day when half of our appointments are released. And sometimes it happens where you can't get that first day and you try again the second day. But what we've found by talking to residents is that much prefer that model to having to go into an office and wait for hours, because they're trying every day perhaps, but they'll eventually get their appointment.
That's problematic for people that have a normal 8 to 5 job. They don't necessarily know for sure that they can get the next morning off. So they kind of need approval from their boss of, hey, when can I go in? I need an hour off to go take care of something. And if the system is, well, you just got to hope that you strike it lucky one day and that your boss is fine with it that day, it's not working for the average person.
Well, I think the data that I've just showed actually negates that argument, but I would just say this. We're in the process of exploring a lot of ideas. I think the extended hours model as well that you talked about is something we'd also like to consider as we continue to search for ways to improve the system. So I appreciate the feedback. I think it's important to remember that we have limited capacity either way. So either way, people are going to be unhappy. And one of the best ways that this body can increase capacity, in addition to the ways that I've laid out today, is to give us funding to hire more people that can serve more people. But I would also emphasize the reason why I'm not asking for that specifically today is because we are in a challenging moment, probably over the next 2 months, where we have a backlog, where we have a increased demand on our system that would play out whether we had walk-ins or appointments. In a way that simply just illustrates that we don't have sufficient capacity to match the current demands emerging out of a pandemic. But we have a plan moving forward to increase our capacity in a way that matches the demand, and the efficiency in which we can move in that direction is increased if we make some of the improvements and changes that we've talked about today, and I would encourage you to make them as quickly as possible, because the quickly that you change the law to enable us to reduce the need for people to come into our offices, that increases our ability to serve more people efficiently and effectively when they need to see us.
I'm in full agreement with you on changing some of the laws. We've worked
Great.
together on that. As far as the call center, I know you touched briefly on that. You said you've quadrupled the capacity
In the past
there.
few weeks, yeah.
How recently was that?
In the past few weeks.
Okay, so full disclosure, this morning in prep for this committee, I said, let's call this number and see how it works. So I called it up, gave the information, was put on hold, got some elevator music, and then a voice came on and said, your wait time's gonna be over 30 minutes. And then I didn't want to actually wait over 30 minutes. I had stuff to do this morning. So that's not working either. It's over 30 minutes to schedule an appointment that is potentially 3 months out. So I don't think that's the solution either.
Well, I
just wanted to
appreciate
bring that
that.
to your
And-
attention.
yeah, that's great feedback. Thank you. And the call center, as I was talking about earlier, something that there are options that we can increase the efficiency of as well, and would love to be able to do that. It's going to take more people and more investment and more modernized services, but I agree we can always continue to move forward in the right direction. What gives me a lot of optimism is to note that we are also as the data just showed, moving in the right direction on all these things. And even in the midst of a pandemic, we were able to keep moving forward. With regards to the call center itself, I'll mention that other call centers like the UIA call center was able to recently increase the number of staff by 1,500 the whole agency was able to increase staff by 1,500 to address an increased need for demand right now. That is something that you can enable us to do, that we don't have. I don't have the ability on my own to increase the capacity of our service by hiring more people and increasing more hours. I'd love to do it, but it takes investment. And so that's an immediate thing you can do to enable us to serve more people in this moment. But again, I'll just caution you to see that as a short-term solution, because I think long-term we can get to a point where we're efficiently delivering services in a cost-effective way through a lot of the solutions I've identified.
So, and I'm going to get to other members here, but I do want to
Great.
get one last point here because he's going to be mad if I don't. Chair Greg Van Workum, he chairs the General Government Appropriations Committee, which is your budgets under there. He's made it known to me. They've invited you, I think, 7 times. They have an open standing invitation for you to testify. They write your budget. You're saying there's some budget implications here that we could fund these, yet you haven't gone there and advocated for this. So I guess he's wondering, if you really want this money, why won't you show up for the committee and actually advocate for these dollars?
Well, I appreciate that. I disagree with the way in which you framed that. However, I'm always willing, as all of you know, to sit down and talk with folks, and as I've done throughout my tenure, about the budget needs of our department, not just myself, but also my staff. So thank you, and we'll continue to do that and to find ways to work in a productive way with legislators who want to work with us to move in the right direction. So, thanks.
Rep. LeGrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm not going to go over everything I want to ask you about. And thank you for being here. A couple points. Obviously, you're a very smart person, and you're deeply collaborative, and I really appreciate that. I think that one of my mantras is complex problems need complex solutions. And so we're dealing with a multi-axis problem here, and I think you've done a very good job of laying that out. And I think that the chair and I are really interested in I think we've got a supply-demand problem here, and reducing the demand is obviously great. And you had some ideas. The chair's got some pending legislation that will, I hope, reduce demand, multi-year registration of cars. I have some ideas I'd love to talk further about later, like whether we can do remote title transfers. I mean, I buy and sell buildings without having to go to a title agency these days. So it seems to me we ought to be able to move plates on cars and move titles on cars. And we've had very quick conversations with some of your staff about this, and I know that you're supportive of anything we can do to reduce demand, right? To clear out the deadwood and move things forward. So I appreciate that. And I'm excited by the idea that we can, maybe a lot of us will have ideas on that front. I do, however, want to sort of move maybe a little more carefully or in detail through, I think, what the chair's central point is here. And so, at the risk of sounding pedantic, the old Adam Smith invisible hand of the market analysis, I think, applies here. And I think there's a point that the chair has been making that I want to really flesh out very, very clearly. And that is, right now we have in your offices, as I understand it, essentially two ways that we can give the supply. One is you say, I would like an appointment, and it turns out to be a couple months down the road, or you get in line twice a day for the, I would like an appointment soon, and you got the 8 and the noon thing. And yes, it works. My brother's used it a number of times. So it works for my brother. I am perfectly happy to spend any amount of time anywhere as long as I've got a good book. I would be willing, personally, to walk into an office as long as I've got a good book and I had a decent breakfast and sit there for 3 or 4 hours, because what I'm doing when I do that is I am signaling that I am willing to spend a lot of my time to prioritize my position in getting services from the Secretary of State. Now, what I'm saying here is the model that we're using now doesn't allow people to essentially bid with their time. And people who are bidding with their time are saying, I'm willing to burn 4 hours of my time here because I really want that handicap sticker for my wife's surgery or whatever. I know it's going to take me 4 hours, but I also know that Steve Johnson's got a job and he's going to have to leave eventually. And so maybe getting a plate for his motorcycle is going to look a lot less important to him an hour from now than it does right now. Now, Facebook Market is dealing with that, how much do you value an appointment issue right now outside of our system. But I think, and Mr. Chair, feel free to jump in on this, but I think that the concept of allowing in-person people to come in is I'm able to sort of signal that I value this appointment more than the person sitting next to me, in the sense that I'll sit there and I'll see if I can outwait them, or the people who don't show up. And so essentially, without the ability to have bodies in seats, we don't have a great way to signal, I really, really want this appointment. Because if everyone's getting on a line at 8 o'clock in the morning and trying to get an appointment, there's no way to signal who wants it most urgently. That's also true with our getting appointments in 2 or 3 months. Now, I guess the everyday thing gives us a signal that you want it more than 2 or 3 months from now. So there's a thin signal that I want an appointment urgently if I go for the 8 and the noon appointment and I sit at a computer. But that also doesn't solve the problem of Representative O'Malley's point, which is the not tech savvy, or the people like me who get angry at computers very quickly. Like, I would rather sit in a seat to signal my urgency as long as I've got Dostoevsky, whereas sitting and wanting to, throw my computer out the window very, very quickly makes me angry. And so maybe there's some tech anger issues too in the 8 and the noon appointment, and maybe I should be a better person and not have tech anger. But I do have tech anger fairly often. Whereas when I'm sitting in a Secretary of State's office, I actually don't mind it. For me, it's kind of like I get to see people, and like maybe this is why I'm a politician,
can you get
right?
to your question quickly?
Yeah. I don't mind sitting in a group of people, and as long as I've got a book and I know that it's going to take me time.
All I'm saying, Representative LeGrand, is it doesn't have to be that way. Everything you're talking about, it's great. I know you. I know you enjoy pontificating and philosophizing. Great. I'm interested in solving problems. And what we have here is a problem in our state offices, in our state agencies, where we have reduced capacity and increased demand. That's it. And so we can talk about different ways to solve that problem. With the particular issue you're talking about, I think it's also important to note the difference, a key difference, between the model of a walk-in and the model of scheduling ahead of time and letting us know what your service is and prioritizing based on that, is that the walk-ins, everyone just came in. There was no prioritization if indeed you did have something that would only take 5 minutes versus something that would take an hour. And that's a lot of times why the model didn't work. And now we piloted some things like, well, what if we had an express line for people who just had ABC different things and they would take 5 minutes? But if you don't have enough staff in an office to actually staff an additional option like a fast pass line, if you don't have enough staff, then all you're doing is taking someone off of the other side and giving them there, and then increasing the wait or reducing capacity for everyone else. And so one of the reasons why this model is more efficient than the just everyone walk in and take a number model is because we learn ahead of time what someone's need is. And this is one of the things that I want to talk about as well in terms of prioritizing things like handicap placards or title transfers. Within the system, we can actually create appointments just for that and models just for that, as opposed to just saying everyone walk in and we're not going to be able to tell you how long the wait's going to be. We're just, and so I just think it's important to note what you're talking about is an inefficient model. It's a broken model. It doesn't have to be that way. But go ahead. I see you want to have more that you want to say.
So look, I think we may be talking past each other a little bit here. So let's say, for example, hypothetically, you have 10 staff, right? And yes, if you take one person off and have them do a different task, then you have only 9 people left for the alpha
There's
task.
no office that has that many staff, just so you know.
I'm just keeping the math.
Under
I'm
the
just keeping the
current
math simple. We
budget.
could 5 staff, then do you take one person off and have them do something, have one track. It's a little bit like lines in a grocery store, right? So we could, yes, it's
No.
true that, well, okay, sorry. No. It's, I guess, first of all, I wasn't suggesting that there's an either or here. I'm not suggesting we go back to everyone come and sit. That's, I think, absurd. I don't think that makes any sense at all. What I was suggesting was, and let me put it in the form of a question, do you see a route to more flexibility? I mean, I think more options, as long as they don't cost us efficiency. If you're saying it net costs us number of people who are served to have that separate line, then I hear you, and that's what I want to.
I completely agree that we should be increasing the number of options people have to do business with the state. Indeed, that's what we've been working to do. But what we see is when you increase the options, I think you should look at it as what are the options that people who aren't taking sides of an aisle, aren't playing partisan politics, or actually, what are the options actually people want? Great that you love reading and want to sit in an office for hours, and there's, I'm sure, doctors' offices perhaps or others that can embrace that part of you. But I would say what we've seen, what the data shows, is residents want to be able to do their grocery shopping, and especially if they have a simple transaction, be able to get that done while they're grocery shopping. That was the idea behind creating the self-service station at a Meijer or a Kroger. And so I think in terms, I agree, we should be looking at options. I agree that we want to reduce part of the goal is to reduce the number of people who need to make a branch office visit. That's the direction that we're moving in, so that those offices visits become efficient and convenient, but also making sure when we look at other options and when we invest in other options that we're actually making them options that people want and that actually are moving forward, taking advantage of not just new technology, but new innovative ideas that other industries have already explored, because we're not the only entity that serves customers. There are other entities that serve customers that we've learned from and that are looking to do these same type of things, like DTE Energy or Consumers Energy, who we've talked to their leadership and spent time there to say, what are you doing to solve this problem? Because I'm interested in talking with entities and agencies that have similar issues and then finding out what they do to solve. Now, obviously, private entities have a lot more freedom to choose and explore options. We have more funding restrictions and more legal restrictions, and that's why I'm here today to ask you to help us with both of those things so that we can be more innovative and break free of this model that we've accepted as the way things have to be. We go and wait in hours and move forward, look around to what other businesses have done, to what other states have done, and take those best ideas and bring them here for our residents. That's what I'm doing. And actually, Chair Johnson, sorry, if I could address the budget issue, because I agree. We want to have those conversations with legislators, particularly focused on budget. And I'll just highlight one of the things that we've asked for, which is a long overdue increase in a record lookup fee. if that increase was made from $11 per record lookup fee, which is one that is when companies look up driver's records, they typically pay $11 per fee. We're actually on the lower end of states in terms of the fee. We've asked to be able to increase that fee $4 to $15 per record lookup fee. That fee would be borne at most by about 10 companies like LexisNexis, who are typically doing those mass drivers lookups. If that is done, we'll get $8 million more to our department, which would help us significantly address this capacity issue. And that's what we want to do. That's what we want to, it would help us expand hours. It would help us hire more people. It would help us open mobile offices or small offices, driver centers that just handle a couple of different issues. So again, I just want to point that out, and maybe you can pass that back to your friends. And
I'll just say the state budget's larger than it's ever been, so I don't think we
Yeah.
need to add more money to the budget. And I would say if I propose an idea of increasing Secretary of State fees at the same time people have to wait months to get
no,
there.
I'm sorry, you must have misunderstood.
deadly
That's not what I'm
combination.
talking about. I'm actually talking about a record lookup fee that is borne by companies, not our residents.
Well, those
So-
get passed on to people. But I got to keep moving on to other people here. Representative
Not.
Altman.
They're not even state into that specific a little bit more so you can get the details.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Madam Secretary, for being here to testify. I just wondered, with such unprecedented demand, if now is the time to completely overhaul the system. How significant of a bottleneck are we seeing in terms of getting an appointment in the Secretary of State's office? Do you have any data that shows how many people are currently driving without a license plate or a vehicle registration?
We are working. It's impossible for us to know at a particular moment that data, but what we do know, and what we've been able to find through trying to get that number exactly, is that a lot of those individuals simply just don't know that they don't need to go to a branch to renew their license or to renew their plate. And a lot of that's because it's just been in the past 60 days where people have not had to go to an office to renew their license. So part of it is educating folks who feel that they don't have a choice but to do that, that they do have a choice, and that's part of the challenge that we're in right now. But I think that's a really important question, and I'm very mindful not just about that issue, but about how that's hitting our Black and brown communities in the state and others that we want to make sure have all the information they need to renew their plates and renew their licenses.
Sure. And I understand that you can renew your plate and your registration online.
And your
but-
license.
And your license as well. But for some services, you actually do need to go into the branch office to conduct the service, and for example, transferring a title and
Correct.
things like that.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
I'm among those people as well. I bought a new vehicle, I believe it was in late March, and scheduled an appointment on April 2nd, and the quickest I could get in is mid-July. So I'm among those folks that are currently driving around right now without a license plate. And what's really concerning to me is people are now starting to be fined and ticketed for not having that. I guess I would ask, what do you say to those folks?
Yeah, two things. One, I agree. I think top of list of problems to solve right now is the title transfer issue, because that has emerged, particularly over the last few months. So you've been in that moment.
Sure.
To be one of the ways in which the current system is most in need of change. And so one of the things, as I mentioned, I'm going to be meeting with staff this week and next week to solve this particular issue, because even if we can, and this is something we've done in the past, temporarily expand hours or allow for, every day we have, this many appointments available just for title transfers.
Yeah.
And then when we've done that in the past, that actually ameliorates the issue. When we've had people, needing to renew licenses back when they had to come into the office to do so. So I completely hear you. I completely agree, and would love to keep you and your office informed of exactly what we're able to do but that's top of list and top of mind to actually that particular transaction, where I think it's in this moment emerging out of the pandemic, where people are continuing to buy and sell vehicles privately, where we've seen the biggest challenge in this current model.
Sure. And I tend to agree with Representative LeGrand. I would like to see an option to not be able to go into the branch office
Yeah.
to transfer a title and things like that.
Yeah,
But-
me too.
But
We'd love you to change the law so that it is an option.
Yeah, and let's continue that conversation.
Great.
Another thing I want to bring to your attention is the 8 a.m. and the 12
Yeah.
p.m. Next day appointment option. Have you Have you tried to actually use that option?
I have. Yeah, I actually got my real ID that way. I made an appointment on Thursday for Friday.
Because I've been having a really hard time with that. So I don't think it's quite as easy as you say it is. I mean, would you be willing to demonstrate at 12 p.m. Just how easy it is to book that next day appointment?
Well, I'll say this. I'll say this. We know every day at those times the appointments are booked quite quickly. And that, to me, is the data point that we should be looking at to show that we need to increase the number of appointments that are available next day. And that's what we're doing. We've already increased the number of appointments, tens of thousands of numbers over the past few weeks. Demand's going to decrease, capacity's going to increase over the next month. And what I'd love to do is be able to, I mean, one, I'm going to be visiting all these branch offices in the next few months as well to identify specific needs for specific communities and specific branches to increase efficiencies. But what I'd also love to do is, come back here in the fall to kind of review our progress and talk about things, because I think you've all given us some great suggestions and some great ideas. And I hope in the months ahead, we can work together to advance some of these legislative ideas or other types of ideas, see what's solved and see what's not. This is a problem. This is a problem that has developed over decades in our state, right? And I think the thing I can say the most, and I think a lot of you agree with me, is I want to solve it. And I want to solve it using data. I want to solve it listening to our customers, listening to all of you, and by being on the ground to see how these ideas often play out. Because I know personally that I've had a lot of different ideas that we've tested pre-COVID. Like I wanted a model where people could just come into a branch and be told right away, come back at 4 o'clock and that's when you'll be seen. And they'll know when they come back at 4, they'll be seen. And that didn't work because, again, of the capacity issue where we just had 100 people coming in per hour and able to serve 50, and so you're just stuck until you find ways to reduce supply or reduce demand and increase supply.
Sure.
So all that to say is, yes, your point in particular I note, and I know we're aware that we need to increase the number of next day appointments so that it doesn't feel like you have to race to get them every day. But the model itself is one that if we can increase the number of appointments available actually would work. And then if we increase the number of advance appointments that are available or decrease the demand, then we can have a system where if people decide a week ahead of time or the same day that they're going to go, that they get that appointment that they want. That's the direction we want to head in anyway. So I hear you, and I'm confident that we're in a moment where we're going to see an increase in capacity and a decrease in demand. That's going to help us move in the right direction. And with these other changes as well that we've talked about, prioritizing title transfers, for example, we can continue to increase the efficiencies. But none of us can forget, we're in May of 2021, just emerging out of a historic pandemic. The impact of that on our offices right now cannot be underestimated. The impact on that on our demand and supply and capacity is a real thing. And that, when you're talking about this system not working or these challenges, that's what it's a reflection of. And that's what I want to solve. So I'm grateful. I know you have more questions, but I just want to say I'm grateful for the willingness that you've given me to hear me out today. And I'm listening to you as well.
Well, I know I appreciate those comments, and that gives me some optimism. And I agree. I mean, some things need to be changed and revamped.
Yeah.
So I do applaud your efforts to make the Secretary of State's office more efficient. So anyway, thank you for being here.
Thanks.
I liked when you said, listen to the people, listen to the customers, and they are saying we want a walk-in option, I will point out. Representative Riley.
Thank you. Yeah, we talked a little bit already about the late fees, and I don't really even know all that's out there, but right now somebody has to have a license plate then to drive, otherwise they could be fined, correct?
They have to have a tab that is, but our ability to waive late fees is something that we've asked to have more latitude over that we don't have under the current law.
So in the situation where a person doesn't have a plate, then at least there may be other ones. What efforts have you made to talk to law enforcement to give them, to inform them that they should have mercy on these people and so that they don't write these tickets for people?
Throughout the pandemic, throughout this whole past 18 months even, we've had those conversations with local law enforcement and with police chiefs and others to make sure they're aware, with Michigan State Police to make sure they're aware. And they've expressed their awareness. We've also talked to motorists about our limitations in being able to waive fees that we'd love to be able to waive, but the law doesn't enable us.
So you've encouraged the municipalities and
Correct.
to waive fees. or waive tickets in these situations?
To be sensitive to the challenges that our motorists are experiencing right now in the midst of a pandemic.
Good, thank you. Because as we're talking about here, I was thinking about, first off, we all know in this room that everybody distrusts government. This is a tremendous battle. And you as a leader in your area have to play the role as the person who goes against a system which has no competition. So you have to be very much on the ball, looking ahead of time what's going to happen. And because we're in an environment where there's no competition for this huge program. And in the free market, this would solve things through competition. So that is kind of like you're responsible to have the forethought to see these things coming. And this would be one situation where we knew these fines and these kinds of things were coming. So that's just one point. And then secondly, along the same lines of hearing what the customers say, have you tried questioning them? Or actually, I'll just say it this way. Have you tried pilot programs for like you've got 130 some branches. Have you tried taking 10 branches and saying, we're going to open these branches up on a basis so you have walk-in?
We've done pilot programs pre-COVID where we had more, I mean, again, remember, we're at a time where our biggest challenge is keeping every branch open. Because if there's a COVID exposure, we have to close the entire branch for 2 weeks, as well as if there's staff that have to be out due to a diagnosis or an exposure. So that actually has been our biggest challenge right now, that in some ways, even if we were able to pilot different things, would give us data that's not reliable because we have this other variable that's
well, I mean,
real,
in this situation right now, we have a big argument going here saying some of these branches we should be opening branches for walk-in. And that's a debate. Have you tried that on a small scale to see if it's workable?
It's one of the things that we're going to be looking at as we talk through different solutions internally as a department. I think we haven't seen data to show that would solve an issue, solve the issue, but we're certainly, it's something that, I hear the feedback, and we're going to be taking that back to just look at the data, and would love to involve you in those conversations.
Well, yeah, I just reiterate, that's kind of, as a leadership role, you've got to be looking ahead of everybody else on these things.
I agree. I'll mention pre-COVID, that's actually what the model was. It was you had both walk-ins and appointments, and we saw the same sorts of issues. It didn't solve either. You still had a lot of people who wanted appointments, and we weren't able to give appointments to everyone, in part because we had to allocate staff to handle walk-ins. So it didn't necessarily solve the capacity issue. But that said, post-COVID, as we emerge out of this, we're looking at all different options, and I agree that solving this problem is about looking forward. It's about anticipating what people want and and looking at other industries and seeing what best practices exist. I will note one of the things we keep hitting up against is a wall of, sometimes the law simply just requires this, and that's where we need help adjusting, and many folks here have been somewhat helpful in that regard. And we also hit a wall with funding, because the other difference with us is that we don't keep the revenue we generate, right? We don't, if we find a model that actually increases revenue or increases efficiency, that doesn't increase anything in terms of our bottom line that we can then return and reinvest in more innovation. So that's another challenge that if, we were able to, find ways to navigate through, we might be able to move more effectively and efficiently as private industry often.
But you can still cut costs and operate more efficiently. There's always that opportunity.
Oh,
yes.
and that is what
and that's necessary. It's an ongoing necessary thing.
And that is exactly why for 2 years we have taken budget cuts and still operated more efficiently and moved more services out of the offices. So yeah, I agree.
Which is what we expect. And the last question on the kiosks is, as we're talking about customer service, do some of them not accept cash, or is it all of them don't accept cash?
None of the former ones accepted cash. Most of the current ones, with the exception, if not all. There are a handful that don't, but we have. It was one of the things I asked for. So most of the current ones do accept cash. There are a few that don't, but we're continuing to. But yes, we want to ensure. And again, the majority of self-service stations do accept cash.
Yeah, that's just an excellent example of what the free market, if we had competition, would have done. That would have been done a long time ago, because it would have forced all that. But thank you so much for coming in. Appreciate
thank you.
Representative Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Secretary Benson, for being here with us today. I got 3 points. I love my colleague here, but I will not go that long. And so when I think about what you've proposed about the appointments only, I just think about how change causes anxiety. People just become anxious because we've been doing what we've been doing for the number of years that we've been doing it. And so what I wanted to know, and I have a couple of questions, but what I want to know is more about your communications plan and how we're engaging grassroots even to continue to get the word out on how this thing works. Because I'll just tell you, my kids kept telling me I needed Cash App, and I'm like, I'm not linking my bank account to no foreign entity. That just sounds crazy to me. But quite honestly, when they went to college, I could get them money like this when I used to have to wait days. And so all I'm saying is I understand how change causes anxiety, but in order to ease those anxiety, we need to be educated on those changes. And so I'm really interested in knowing about, your grassroots plan to make certain that residents are clear. And then I have a question.
Thank you. I completely agree. In fact, a lot of times we internally talk about our work as it's about increasing the efficiency and convenience of our services while educating customers along the way, because you need both, and I've experienced in multiple different industries and ventures. So we are working. This is again where investment does enable more of a efficient an expansive approach, but we agree, and we are working to have a public education campaign that we've done in different ways through both trusted messengers and through developing strong content so that people know. I mean, frankly, a lot of the discussions, for me, this happens consistently. When there are attempts to create controversies, it actually creates education opportunities for citizens. I think more people know than ever before about this option and about their other options for coming for doing their business with the state, which is a really good thing. And I think it's why we're starting to see even less demand for office visits and more people taking advantage of their other options. But I agree, we still want to do that work, especially if we keep improving our services and changing things and innovating. And we'd love to work with you and get your insight. I know my Deputy Secretary of State, Hester Wheeler, has been really involved in talking to community organizations about this, and that's been, obviously, we're coming out of an era where and this is one of my first non-virtual events that we've done, or very few over the past year. So as we also emerge out of this current pandemic, I think there will be more opportunities for conversations and community education efforts, and would love to work with you on that.
That sounds great. Thanks. So with that, I know that, hindsight is 20/20. We had no idea the unintended consequences that were going to be caused with those extensions, which is what caused a tremendous backlog in your department,
That's right.
And so we know that, at least I'm hoping that if you can go ahead and get that backlog cleared, then you'll be able to level set.
Oh, yeah.
And get right back to what you were doing and piloting these walk-in options perhaps. But again, that may take some funding. And so with that, I just wanted you to know that I dropped a bill this morning that is looking to appropriate some additional dollars to your department so that you'll be able to do that. Let's get the backlog cleared so that when people call, they're able to get those next day appointments. So I'm hoping to get the support of my colleagues. I requested oversight, Mr. Chair, so maybe we'll be able to discuss that bill here. And again, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your hard work. You do have one of the toughest jobs in the state. Nobody wants to go to Secretary of State. And then lastly, I tell my good friend, your husband, I say hello. We work together in the mayor's office, so I miss him. Tell him hello. Thank you so much for your hard work.
I appreciate it, Representative Young. What you talked about is exactly right, and that we are in a challenging moment, which is just, everything. It's always interesting to see how things are timed. But even if we did nothing, that you would see an increase in capacity and an increase in availability for appointments over the next 6 months, because of a lot of the backlog you're talking about is going to be worked through and addressed. Now, none of us, I'm certainly not someone who likes to do nothing. I always want to continue to improve and find new ways to improve. So that's exactly why I'm here. That's exactly what we're doing. But you're absolutely right that in this moment, and sort of the immediate, the last stages, what we hope is the last stages of the coronavirus and all of the backlog that it's created in our offices, is a moment that we're going to work through. And then as we do that, we're going to continue to innovate and develop long-term solutions for this. And exactly what you talk about, you're right. This is a hard problem to solve. No state, as I mentioned before, has actually really solved this issue of how you ensure the DMV, for lack of a better word, or however you call it in a particular state, is a place where people enjoy going. What has happened in the past is a decision not to try to solve the issue. Is as simple to kind of do piecemeal solutions that actually didn't solve the problem. I'm trying to do something different. I am trying to completely innovate and reframe and innovate how we do business with our citizens in a way that takes advantage of ideas, takes advantage of what the data says people want, and implements solutions. It's not easy. It's a lot easier when you're able to work across party lines and develop solutions together. So I appreciate those of you today who've expressed that willingness to do so. And I look forward to continuing that conversation because we've got short-term needs and short-term solutions that we can explore. And then we've got long-term vision that I think we all can hopefully work towards if we're able to find ways to do that. Thanks.
Representative Hoytinga.
Thank you for being here. Yeah, nobody denies the supply and demand. And at a time where we have all-time ultimate high demand, we have removed a supply. We have removed an option. So can you tell me 2 questions? What does staff do when somebody misses an appointment? What are they doing in the office? So say there's 5 or 6 missed appointments. What are they doing?
So a couple of things. One, our actually missed appointments are down to just about 2 or 3%. It was 9% when the model first began, and so it's a very important question. It's something that we've looked at. Oftentimes, they're able to take advantage of just taking the next customer right away, the next resident right away, because they're typically there. But we also solve for that because our appointments are, in order to increase capacity, we've reduced the time allotted so that oftentimes a 10-minute appointment will be slotted for 7 minutes in the system so that someone will, basically the next appointment is actually typically already there. But we also have a policy that we have instructed and continue to instruct our staff to do, that if someone does show up and there is someone who can serve them, they can give them an appointment right away and serve them right away, and we want to continue to make that clear for our staff throughout the state.
Okay, and I haven't fact-checked this. It's just something that was said in the last hearing. If somebody does miss an appointment, are they told they can't remake one?
No, actually, we've had an issue oftentimes where people do miss appointments, and again, we're reducing that number, which is the goal. And we recognize that sometimes people have to reschedule an appointment, which we always contact people where they miss an appointment. We've also seen, and perhaps this is related to people trying to make a profit off of a current system or what, we've also seen people try to make a lot of appointments in bulk and then abuse the system. There has to be some accountability there. And so it's one of the reasons why we've tried to communicate that we don't want to allow for, or we want to restrict the ability for people who've shown they're going to misuse the system and they not actually have a significant, a specific appointment, but they're just going to try to make dozens at the same time to try to gum up the system or make it harder for other people to make appointments. That we won't stand for that, and we have ways at addressing abuse of the system.
I guess I would just add one final thing.
Yeah.
I represent 3 counties, and they want the offices open, at least until we can get this under control. We understand about the COVID challenges, but on behalf of the people I represent, please open the offices back.
Thank you, Representative.
All right, so unfortunately, I think we could probably go for several more hours here, but we are running out of time.
How about 2 more minutes?
I know multiple people still have questions. I can't get to everyone. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Sorry, Representative. So I think going forward, we're not opposed to a lot of your ideas. I think we support a lot of those ideas. We want to modernize. I think we want to keep that walk-in option. So many people, they rely on that for last-minute things that the appointment just isn't working for, especially as we come out of the pandemic here. I think this is actually the time that you don't want to move away from that. So I know going forward, we're going to continue to work on that, but we do have to go to session here. So seeing no further business for the committee, the Oversight Committee is adjourned.